Okay, hello everybody. I hope I got this right. Yep, I can see myself. Say hi, Mr. Betcher.
Hi.
Yes, every time. 100% of the time. It sometimes works every time. Anyway, it's Sunday evening, and that means it is BreakSec podcast slash audio stream slash Twitch stream slash YouTube stream, whatever. It is a great day, and because I have my friend Kaitlyn on, as you can see, she's right down there on the screen. Or no, I'm sorry, right up there on the screen.
Somewhere. I'm not looking at the screen. I'm somewhere on your screen.
Well,
somewhere
on the Zoom, you're right. You're right there. My God, I can't get my lefts and rights correct, so I'm just all assed up. So, but I'm glad you're able to join us, Mr. Betcher. Glad to see you. I'm glad you're able to tear yourself away from family and join me for an awesome stream. Miss Berlin will be here. So at some point when all of our overlays just go wonky, we'll know that Miss Berlin has joined us, and I'll just switch over to the 4-person one and then modify some name labels, and we'll continue on from there. So,
complicated.
You doing okay, Mr. Betcher? How you doing? Doing all right?
Yeah, doing good.
You appear to
have all get out, but
yeah. You appear to have shrunk down to the size of an ant and are in some kind of giant jungle.
It's like yes, yeah.
I like.
Actually, it's not normal size grass. It's giant grass. How about that?
Giant. Okay. All right. Very cool. Like sawgrass or something. Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually quite pleased at how well Zoom does backgrounds. Just for everybody, I would save me a ton of money on my chroma that I have back here. But yeah. So I want to get started here. Kaitlyn, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us today. I am very interested to talk with you because I saw you on the internet as somebody who is in I don't want to say a very niche hacking area
it's niche. It's totally niche.
Well, I was looking at the CCDC stuff, which is the we can talk a little bit about what that acronym means. But there was a satellite hacking event, and I saw you on the team there, and I was like, I should probably get her on. And then there was a story that I just saw the other day about the Earth having a new moon. At least temporarily. Don't worry, y'all. It's not like we're going to be on Tatooine or anything like that. But I was just incredibly interested in the asteroid thing and then the satellite thing, and I was like, hey, we're going to be talking about heavenly bodies in space, and why not get somebody who can hack those bodies? So, Kaitlyn, thank you for coming in and spending some time with me today. And us.
Oh, I'm happy. I'm totally happy to be here. And yeah, let's talk space. Let's talk computers. Let's talk hacking. Those are my jams.
Right on. Okay. Well, as we're fond of doing here, I'd like to know more about you. So if you could tell us a little bit about what you do, how you got to where you're at, and how you got into space hacking and photography of space.
Yeah. So, okay. So this is a long story. So I was actually a school teacher. And one of the things that you learn when you are teaching grade school is that a lot of the students don't have ideal home lives. When you go to school, the teachers are actually keeping a lot from you. Right. We don't want to tell the other students what the other students are doing. Like there's a expectation of privacy. Right. But when you do become a teacher, you realize, oh my gosh, this student has these issues going on. This one just lost a father. This one is in an abusive household. This one is dealing with, all this other abuse. And when I got into the classroom and I saw that, I was like, I cannot deal with this. Okay. And so I needed to train to learn child psychology, violence intervention, all that kind of stuff, so I could help these kids. And that's a lot of heavy learning. So I went back to school, and the whole intent was to do that education. And I actually did complete it. But while I was doing all those heavy classes, because I was always doing computers and stuff, I thought, well, I'm back at school. I will also take some hacking classes, and I will help teach astronomy to the public because that's another hobby of mine. I like astronomy. So while I was there learning about child development, I fell into some hacking classes, did some hacking competitions. It turns out school teachers make pretty good hackers.
Nice.
Yeah, so here I was, hacking computers for fun and doing astronomy.
Okay.
Well, one day somebody told me that NASA was looking to hire um, uh, security professionals. And I was like, you know what? I have a plan. I have a good plan. I am going to apply. I have no qualifications whatsoever. I have zero background. I haven't worked in the industry. I'm a school teacher, but I'm going to apply. And that way I can get a tour of NASA. That was my plan. And so I applied and I got there and I talked to them and we had a nice conversation and I got a tour of the facilities and I was like, that was awesome. And I went home thinking that was the best day ever. And on my way home, I got this call. They're like, we want to hire you at NASA. And I was like, the hell? The what?
Nice.
And so there's one rule I always kept as a teacher: never be resentful of your job. Never. When you're working with kids, never be resentful of your job. And if I knew that I could be at NASA and not, with the kids, I would have been resentful. So at that point, I said, okay, bye, kids. I'm going to NASA. And that's sort of how I ended up in space hacking. It was
Nice.
just a scheme that went awry in the best way possible.
Fantastic. Big roundabout way of doing things. You also do some astrophotography, and we definitely want to talk about that because it's not as easy as you just taking a Polaroid outside and banging out a shot or whatever. I've seen some of your photos that you've produced, and they're quite amazing, and we're definitely going to talk about some of that. But all right, so let's start with the CCDC. How did you get involved with them, and why did they we'll talk about CCDC. I've got a follow-on question there.
Right. So let's talk about CCDC. So, like I said, I did hacking competitions when I was going back to college, and one of them was the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. And what that is cybersecurity students are put in front of a bunch of machines, and they have to defend these machines against a whole team of red teamers who are all industry experts. And It is absolute chaos. It is always fun. There's one team that makes the boxes and they make them really silly and themed to work together. So one year it was Jurassic Park, except that they spared every expense. So the park was run off Raspberry Pis and stuff. And so basically what we do is we sit students down and we say defend against hackers. And then I'm actually part of the red team now that tries to hack into the students. Mm-hmm. And we try to give them a good time. Essentially, the general strategy on the red team is we get in, we're very quiet. We just put up our back doors. We just keep persistence. And then in the last hour, we start taking things down and defacing their websites and stuff like that. And we have a whole bunch of tools, and it takes months and months of preparation, but it's a very unique environment. Okay. Usually when you're on a real red team, you go on systems and people do not realize you're on their system for months and months, which does not speak very well to the current state of security. When you are on the CCDC red team, the students know you're trying to get on their system, and they know you're probably on there, and they're looking for you. So it really makes you as a red teamer have to up your game, to be able to stay hidden and stay on those machines.
Oh, very nice. Okay. Yeah. All right. Mr. Betcher, if you've got any questions about CCDC or anything, just please feel free to drop on in here. So the CCDC that you did last year was about satellite hacking?
No, I think somehow some wires got crossed, and this year is going to be about satellite hacking.
Ah, okay.
Uh,
Okay.
and so actually, I just spent the weekend working on. This isn't public information yet, but
Should
I am
where
working with the black team. I am working with the black team to develop a system that will be a fully simulated satellite for the students. And the students will have to keep that satellite up in the air from the red team.
Okay. Um,
Yes.
well, if you're one of the CCDC participants, cover your ears because you didn't hear any of that.
Yep.
We'll probably cut that out of the podcast just to make sure we.
Oh no, you can keep it in, but
Oh, okay. Oh, it's
yeah,
not public knowledge,
And-
but it's not
And the
trade
black
secret
team
either.
is the team that builds the simulation.
correct. Yeah. So I'm doing both red teaming and black teaming this year. So I will on one invitational, I am helping build one box, and that's all I will say. All I will say, and there's going to be a simulated satellite that the students will have to deal with. But
Sorry about that. I think I know where I got my wires mixed up. There was a hack-a-sat contest at DEF CON 29. I think I may have gotten that mixed up where there was some satellite hacking being done at DEF CON 29. So my apologies for making that mistake. I will also disable autoplay on HTML5 just because they hate me. I guess the big question is, so this is a satellite simulator. How do you? I'm imagining it's not hard to simulate a satellite. It seems to me that maybe the only thing you have to simulate is some latency, maybe back and forth. I mean, what's the difficulty in making sure a satellite actually does? The simulator acts the way that a satellite does, and I would imagine it would depend on the type of satellite. A military satellite obviously versus a civilian or communication or weather satellite.
correct. So when you're simulating a satellite, there's a lot of pieces that go into it. It's a lot of satellite hacking is very similar to IoT hacking. The only difference is that with IoT devices, you can pick it up and you can put it into your lab. With the satellites, it's up in space, so you can't get to it. You can't pick it up. You can't open it up.
Unplug it.
You can't unplug it, exactly. So, part of like when you simulate a satellite, you have to simulate a few different components together. So a satellite is not just a computer. You have things like solar panels, and you have to simulate when the solar panels are going to be in sunlight and when they're not in sunlight. So that means you have to simulate, like where's the Earth, where's the sun,
right?
And the very basic stuff like that. And then you start going into subsystems, like maybe your satellite has 2 different CPUs. It's not uncommon for satellites to have various boards working in tandem together, running different software. And then once again, we get to the software. So a lot of satellites will run something called a core flight system, or CFS, which is very similar to ArduPilot if you ever worked on drones. It's just sort of on a lot of systems. And so you have to emulate like the full system, emulate like what the reaction wheels are doing. And we can talk about these terms later, but there are ways to like spin the spacecraft and make the spacecraft go forward, and you have so much fuel. And so you have to keep track of all of that within the simulation, and have all the parts of the simulation talk to each other in a way that doesn't cause everything to explode.
Right. Wow. Okay. There's a lot to unpack there. So
now, when you say keep it up in space, is there a way to take it out of its orbit?
Absolutely. So if you have something in orbit, all spacecraft, or pretty much every spacecraft, has some sort of thruster on it. Even if it's just some small CubeSats might not, but anything really professional is going to have some way to maneuver. And the reason why that is for collision avoidance. Once in a while, spacecraft will get too close to each other, and so they will say, hey, you got to move a little bit. So move. Normally, spacecraft will run on something called monopropellant once it's in space. And monopropellant is this god-awful stuff called hydrazine. And they use that because it basically like explodes with everything. So they basically have a release valve and a reactant. The hydrazine, hits the reactant and then makes an explosion like a rocket, would you normally think of as like a booster. Yeah. So there's no like ignition sequence. There's nothing like that might go wrong in space. It varies. You want to keep it as simple as possible. So that's why hydrazine is used in space. More recently, though, we've seen an uptick of something called ion thrusters, which you can imagine as essentially you have like a tank of xenon gas. You ionize the gas so that it is sort of, I guess, attracted to magnetic fields. And then you have this grid behind the engine that once again is electrified. And you can then accelerate the particles much faster than they would be from like a chemical reaction. But the problem is that it's like a gentle breeze. So you have a lot of movement, but it's a very slow acceleration. But we're seeing an uptick of that in low Earth orbit systems.
So
but of course, yeah.
It's a lower specific. Is it, what do they call it? Specific impulse, I think is what they call it.
Yeah, actually, it's a higher specific impulse.
Higher specific.
So if it's
impulse,
if it's more efficient, but lower thrust.
That's right. Yeah. You can do it for longer, for less, instead of a lot shorter amount of time. Kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay,
exactly.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. So you're simulating a satellite, which means you also have to. You're also tracking it virtually as it is it whether it's polar orbiting or it's geostationary or geosynchronous or what have you. So that's amazing. What kind of I don't want to. What kind of defenses does a satellite have? When I'm thinking once it's launched, short of anti-satellite rockets or a kinetic collision, I mean, are countries hacking satellites right now? Is this why satellites this year for the CCDC? Is it because of proof of concept, or is it because now we have things like SpaceX out there and we've got other cluster satellite systems? Is it a hey, we should probably keep ahead of this?
What I will say is that, remember how I said satellites were sort of like IoT in space?
Right.
That is not a exaggeration. That is exactly what they are, and they are critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure. Yes. And so the general philosophy of putting satellites in space has been redundancy first, right? You want to make sure that it actually works. You're spending millions and millions of dollars on these systems, and they have to work. You cannot have systems going into boot loops. And we've seen this before in attacks. So previously, hackers have gone onto satellites, caused them to essentially power on and use up all the power, and then shut down, turn back on, use up all the power, shut back down, creating a boot loop. And now millions of dollars worth of satellite equipment is ruined. You cannot have that.
Right.
One of the big arguing points that I've been in the industry is encryption. Usually satellites have specialized encryption hardware, so that when you send commands, it goes to the encryption hardware, and then then it gets to the main board. Right. What happens if that encryption hardware fails? What if there's a bug? What if there's a short? All these things can happen. How do you recover your satellite? Generally speaking, most satellite designers say, well, fall back into an unencrypted mode by default.
Oh, that makes sense. It makes sense.
It totally makes sense. The problem, of course, is that how do you keep that secure?
Right.
My philosophy is, if it's in an unencrypted state, you should have like bare minimum safe access to be able to repair what's going on and nothing more. But we're also seeing the opposite now with spacecraft designers, where they're like security first, and then something like that will happen, and we're going to lose satellites. But one of the cool things about modern satellite fleets, like you see with SpaceX, or I guess the upcoming Kuiper, is that there are so many satellites that if the encryption fails, if something goes wrong with the satellite, they can afford to lose it.
Okay.
So
Oh,
yeah,
right.
that's what's changing. Yeah.
There's so much redundancy they can stand to lose a handful of satellites or one or two. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So
So how many, in your estimation, satellites are lost annually or
oh,
percentage
great
wise?
question. How many satellites are lost every year? I don't know off the top of my head how many just get busted. Usually what happens is that satellites have a working period that they're designed for, a lifetime. And then a lot of satellites will work past that lifetime. And then they'll eventually fizzle out. I don't know how many that is or what percentage. Most satellites work to their expected time frame, at least. I'll say
Okay.
that. There's not too many where I've heard like, oh gosh, we had this 5-year mission and got cut down to 3 because it's no longer working. But what I have heard are issues where the satellite will kind of work, like, and then
Right.
the engineers on the ground will be like, you know what, we can use the reaction wheels to like turn around the arm now, because one of the reaction wheels doesn't work, and we'll use the other two, and we'll make it work,
Right.
and that kind of, and crackpot engineering to get the satellite back in operation again.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time I see news stories about like Voyager 1 or Voyager 2, and they had some issues with Voyager 1 a while ago where it was sending back gibberish or something. And it's just interesting the kind of, and it doesn't even have to be nation states or anything hacking things. It could be a stray, grain of sand or debris or a cosmic ray hitting a circuit board and frying something or disrupting a communication that causes problems. So it is an interesting, conundrum for building these things. I mean, obviously they have better controls and better building techniques now than they did back in Voyager 1 days. But yeah, that's kind of cool. So I don't want you to give too much away if you know anything about what's going on with CCDC. But what kind of when people do these things with CCD, do they already understand like the basics of satellites? Like what's data links and the way you're going to communicate with the satellite. I'm imagining the simulation is going to be as real as possible, obviously, because you're involved and what have you. But is it like you're going to be sitting in a room and they're going to be sending a signal maybe away, and then they're going to have to send it up, because it's not just you're not just going to communicate directly with the satellite. So how does it how does it work in the real world, and how are you hoping that it will work in a simulation?
So in a simulation at CCDC, so CCDC, there's invitationals, qualifiers, and regionals.
Okay.
Invitationals are just practice, and then qualifiers are like who goes on to the regionals. Whoever wins the regionals goes on to nationals. Whoever wins nationals gets hired for big bucks at the big cybersecurity firms. So the box that I'm developing this year is for invitationals. So if this was something like nationals, I would say, okay, let's get some flat sats, for the students with cameras and everything. For something like invitationals, it's all going to be virtual. All going to be virtual. So they're not going to have to deal with, with latency and link restrictions. They don't have to wait for a satellite to pass.
Yeah. You can only send messages during the window, or it's going over Australia right now, so then you can make your connection. Okay, all right, that's cool. Wow. How much can you tell us? Is it like, are you just building it in as a virtual machine with a Okay, so start a virtual box, and would you like to play a game and hack the sat and send nmap or whatever? I mean, what kind of tools are they specialized, or is it like typical stuff that you would see in a Kali Linux box?
So for the box that I'm giving to the students, it is, and it's so funny you should ask me about this because I literally just got this set up today. The box that I set up is just a virtual machine running on VMware ESXi, and the students are going to come, they're going to sit down, they have no idea what it's going to be like. And of course, we want to make the students laugh and have a good time. So in order to make this specific box, it required a lot of Linux on top of Windows.
Okay.
So I thought, for example, in this time, or for this box, wouldn't it be great to run XFCE, that
Okay.
environment on Windows for the
Nice.
students, since we're already running Linux anyway, so they'll have
Nice.
this weird box with a bunch of satellites,
Nice.
like equipment.
Nice.
And the idea is they're going to sit down and be like, what the hell is this? And then they
Nice.
have to keep it running for, the entire day somehow.
Oh, that's very cool. Okay. Let me see, what is that? So this is like a capture the flag. So what kind of flags would they be looking for? Are they, I mean, obviously, I'm trying to not like equate this to every CTF I've ever heard of, where it's like, you're got to get root on the box or whatever, but are there specific flags that have to be set, or are there specific what is the format for the CTF look like? Is it a capture the flag? Is it a defense kind of? Oh, wait, you said it was an offense defense kind of thing, but are there certain things the red team can do to get points, or the blue team can do to get points?
Correct. So I always say red team always wins, because but it's really about the blue team. So it's the blue teams are competing against each other. So the red team doesn't win. Like it's not red team versus blue team. You have sometimes up to 30 universities all on different blue teams. Yeah, all on different blue teams trying to defend their systems against, us poor red teamers. And there sometimes are like six of us. Yeah, there's like six of us and like, yeah, like 30 teams. It's terrible. But and we just have to, put on malware and go across systems and do what we can. And so the blue teams are all competing against each other. And during the competition, they have what are called injects. So what that means is that they have to produce something to the company. And so it's meant to mimic like a real world scenario where your bosses might be like, hey, we've been breached, tell us, what ports are open on your systems. And the students who are dropped into this random environment have to enumerate their entire network, and send it in, stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
That's how they get points. Yep.
Okay. Mr. Betcher, have you've been in CTS before, yeah?
Yeah, but not many.
Yeah.
Why?
I was
I don't
just
know
wondering
much about them.
what advice would you give to people who are trying to secure their satellites?
Find some free tools that you can install quickly and know how to use them.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much the only advice I'd have. Know how to run commands that'll give you all the network connections on the systems, and try to implement some sort of logging on there so you can actually look real time at what's going on and see if there's any anomalies. Is there a set time where you give them to set anything up that they'd like to before the red team starts?
They have maybe a 5-minute window at the start of the competition before the red team gets their root password. And by the red team getting the root password, that means, so like we're both on equal footing at the beginning of the competition. Red team doesn't know anything, blue team doesn't know anything, but usually within 5 minutes, the red team can hack into a system, get the root password, and then use that to spray all the systems. So there is a 5-minute window about that the blue team can, feel safe.
Okay.
And the idea is they're trying to enumerate everything in 5 minutes so that they can go and change all the root passwords on everything, but they obviously don't get all of the root passwords changed in 5 minutes before y'all you own them up.
Right. And then usually what we do at that point is we throw on a bunch of hidden backdoors onto their systems as soon as we can. And we hope that they don't find us. It is possible for blue teamers to reset their boxes at the cost of certain points. But yeah, I mean, it's they know that we're there, you know, and so it makes it super hard for us to maintain access.
Very cool. Okay.
And I will say the best red teamers at CCDC are the blue teamers. They always blame us for taking down their systems that they do to themselves.
Nice. I like that.
That's
Yes.
awesome.
So yeah, if they could get in there in the first 5 minutes and at least enumerate the processes running on the systems, then they could take a snapshot of that and then compare it to later on, as well as have logging and netstat every once in a while. Yeah, get that
And
snapshot in the beginning and then compare it to what's later, because what's normal in that first 5 minutes. Let's hope.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we'll just pretend that the red team doesn't know anything about process migration.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm assuming, are there advisors? Are there people who are assisting the teams, like to be able to act as a sounding board? It's like, hey, we need to do this, and it'd be like a mentor or an advisor type for those teams, or is it like they just have to work together and with the power of friendship and unhack the SATs?
How about both? So each team has a coach. In fact, I'm friends with Alex Keeler, who runs the Stanford team. So he, for example, teaches and coaches the Stanford students.
Okay.
And the Stanford students, of course, then practice together. It's just like any other sports team kind of deal where, the other's a coach and a playbook, but it's the players have to put in their own time and,
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. And is it like, well, there's 30 teams and there's 6 of you. So some teams may have more than 5 minutes of time before the red team, shines their eye of Sauron upon them. So, in actuality, if you're the first team that they start poking at, you're probably the most unlucky team, right? Or is it, do you have a particular team you're like, yeah, I'm going to get those Stanford people, Harvard, that kind of, is it like one of those things where you're like, do you even know who you're hacking? Is it like, oh, I just picked a random IP and I'm just going to go at it? I mean, do you even, how does it work for the red team?
We have no idea who we're hacking. Although I do say it is a little unfortunate if you are team 1, because a lot of our scripts are like, it's just enumerates through team 1, team 2, team 3, so technically, yeah, if you're like the first team, you probably have a few seconds less than the other teams, but
yeah, that's unfortunate. Are there any restrictions, like things they can't do?
Things they can't do.
I mean, other than like hack the scoreboard and stuff like that.
I mean, that would be really awesome. I'd be super impressed if the students hacked the scoreboard. I do believe there are certain rules, like the students can't disable ICMP traffic, which is good for the red team.
Okay.
And there's certain things that will negatively affect their score. So, for example, there's a scoring engine that makes sure all their services are up. So they can't just firewall off everything. They still have to maintain services.
Okay.
And that's one of the issues too. Like, they can keep logs, but there's random IPs coming in, grabbing services and then doing, just going around to different systems.
Right.
And the red team randomizes their IPs too. So, it's okay.
Okay. Nice. And this isn't the first year you've been working with the CCDC folks. One would ask how you get involved with an organization like this. Is it an invite thing, or were you a competitor at one time and maybe you're now on the other side of the attacking side? I mean, how would somebody, let's say they're interested, they're watching this and they're like, I'd like to get involved. How would something like that happen? Do they have volunteers?
They do. So all you have to do is ask and you're in. There's no, background checks or anything like that. If you want to volunteer, we're happy to have you. Just Google your region. So I'm in the Western region. So that's California, Oregon, and I think Washington State, or actually maybe it's Nevada. Anyway, I'm in the Western regional. So that's WRCCDC. If you Google that, you can find some contacts, and you can just join the Discord server. If you're on the East Coast, you can join the CCDC over there. And we're happy to have you. I was a competitor until I moved on over into, helping organize the competition.
Nice. Okay. Wow. Okay. So there. Wow. Okay. So what would a volunteer be doing if they were like, hey, cool, be your volunteer? Well, I mean, am I going to be running virtual coffee, or am I going to be able to sit at home here? Do I have to travel to wherever WRCCDC is going on to help out with that, or what does that look like for somebody?
It is all up to you and what you feel comfortable with. If you want to come out, you can. So, for example, last year at the regionals, we had people go out to Southern California.
Okay.
But some of the red team decided we want to do it remotely. So we had both in person and remote. And if you volunteer, you don't necessarily have to go on the red team.
Okay.
You can go on various different teams. You can work on developing boxes. If you have good ideas that would be very funny for the students to see, like a router that runs on, a PDP-11 or something, you think that, students would love that, go for it. You can help develop one of those machines. You can also help with operations. So making sure that the sponsors are happy, or making sure the servers are just running, so there's lots of different roles. And the great thing about it is that you're helping students learn, but also you will be learning yourself. So it's the type of education that's beneficial to everyone.
Okay. Very cool. I've posted up links in our Twitch chat for at least the Western region CCDC. There's probably other options. I could go find those for CCDC regionals. Yeah, nationalccdc.org. There you go. They have Midwest at large. Okay.
Yep.
Rocky Mountain Southwest region, which encompasses Texas, Mr. Betcher. There you go. Arizona. Wait a minute. Hold on. My geography fails me. That's New Mexico. So CANT, can't. New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And then there's the Upper Eastern Seaboard, Northeast, and then Mid-Atlantic and Southeast regionals. So, I guess Hawaii and Alaska in the at-large region, maybe, or they have their own.
I thought there was a Pacific region, but
there's Pacific
why
Rim.
would I know? Yeah.
There's a Pacific Rim which has Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, but it's not the same color as Alaska and Hawaii. So I don't know if they have their own or whatever. So that's very cool. At large regional, TBD if needed. Oh, okay. All right. Very nice. How I guess it comes down to realism here. So you've looked probably at real satellites. What type of satellite would this mimic? Would it be like a meteorological one, like a GOES, or would it be are we looking at CubeSats like the SpaceX, or I think you mentioned Kuiper earlier? Would they be similar in function for that? I mean, there's baby.
That's extra cat.
So you said that there's a deliverable for those. So I'm assuming it's like, you're the head of some corporation and your satellite system is, down or being hacked or whatever. So is that part of the fun? Can you be one of the actors, or are there actors for like the CEO of the company or somebody who comes in and has a script or something? Really? They do. Yes.
In fact, that's one of the roles that you can volunteer for. If you volunteer at the regionals, you can be an actor, and you can call up as the boss, or you can call them as a customer, and you can complain about, why isn't my system working? Why can't I access my emails?
Yeah. Okay. That's where it's not realistic. Calling up the satellite guys, asking them why, unless they're are they supposed to be like IT people, like the IT?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah. So they're the IT department, And so, like, one year they were the Bozos Clown College, and
Nice.
they have their own
Nice.
PBX systems, and they had a bunch
Very
of
nice.
people acting like clowns and going, honk honk, I can't get into my computer. You know, it was very
Nice.
funny.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Well, damn, now I kind of want to get it, yeah, now I want to kind of see what it's all about, but, yeah, very nice. Cool. So, is there anything, Mr. Betcher, anything else you want to talk about with satellite hacking?
Satellite hacking?
Yeah. Or the contest, or, maybe you could be an actor. Maybe you could be the CISO or somebody.
Well, I have a question about satellites in general. Are there international laws on satellites? For example, you can only put so and so many. They have to be in a certain orbit. You can't destroy your satellites. If it's going to die in 10 years, you have to make it fall from orbit at some point, so it's not out there forever. I'm more concerned about space junk.
Yeah, so space junk is a big issue. There's something called the Kessler effect, which is if you have two satellites, and here my cat will be one satellite, and this pad of paper will be another. If they collide like that. Now you don't not just have two satellites, you have thousands of smaller satellites, and satellites are going faster than bullets.
Right.
And you have all that shrapnel going, and it doesn't fall down when they hit. It just keeps going in orbit, but you just have thousands of these small satellites. And then those can hit more satellites, and then that creates more debris, which hits more satellites, and it's an exponential function. And there is a point where if there's too much space junk and they're all colliding and creating more space junk, you cannot safely get into orbit for at least 10 years. So basically all our space programs would be shelved for 10 years. Now, in low Earth orbit, things will eventually come down. There is atmospheric drag. It just takes, like I said, about a decade.
Right.
So, it's not like Kessler syndrome will mean the end of our space program and we'll be stuck on Earth and everything's going to be, bad. But we don't want to spend 10 years without low Earth orbiting satellites. I mean, that would be really bad. So much of our infrastructure relies on satellites. So.
Very cool.
But so but the question was about laws. So I'm not a legal person. I can't tell you what international laws there are, but what I can tell you is that if you want to put something in space, there is a lot of paperwork. There is FAA, NASA, and FCC paperwork you need to fill out if you're in the United States. And if you are in other countries, I'm sure there are other regulations, and I'm sure there's international understandings about satellites, because things like Starlink satellites, for example, which are from a private company based here in the United States, are flying over places like North Korea, and it just cannot be helped. Normally, if I had a private aircraft and I wanted to fly over North Korea, I'm pretty sure the FAA would have a knipshit. But with satellites, of course, it cannot be helped. So I'm sure there's some exception in some international treaty or something, but there is a lot of paperwork involved in getting stuff into space.
Yeah, so I found on just looking for international space law, there is actually laws about international space, but the United Nations has an Office for Outer Space Affairs, and it is they address a variety of matters like the preservation of space and the Earth environment, liability for damages caused by space objects, settlement of disputes, rescue of astronauts, the sharing of information about potential dangers in outer space. So, Independence Day, they will be the ones who will coordinate communication if, the aliens come back again. Fundamentals, principles guiding the conduct of space activities, including the notion of space as a province for all mankind, the freedom of exploration and the use of outer space by all states without discrimination. So yeah, they've been around for a bit. Which of course we should have some kind of international law body that is making sure that that's a thing. Very cool, very, very cool. So it's probably as good a segue as any. You have been a fan of astrophotography for a while, and I've seen some of your videos that you made about being able to track things like satellites or International Space Station, that kind of thing. What turned you on to space photography, and how do you I guess the follow-on question will be how do you do it on on Earth, because you're not flying up into space obviously yet, so
Okay, so great question. How did I get into photography? Well, I was doing a lot of just general astronomy, like eyeball astronomy, where you take out the big telescopes, you look through the eyepieces, and you see objects kind of. So the problem
right,
is that I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is
okay,
heavily light polluted.
right,
I can see a few planets. I can see Saturn, and through a telescope eyepiece, it just looks like it has rabbit ears, like the
right,
rings just look like little rabbit ears. Kind of see Jupiter. Um, I tried looking at Andromeda a few times. I could not see it. But the moon is a great target as always, but it's just so much light pollution. And I wanted to look at things and understand the night sky better for myself. And one day I did some back of the napkin math equations, and I found that if you took a image using a CMOS sensor from a telescope and you combine four of them together,
hmm
you essentially double the signal to noise ratio. So you quadruple the number of images you put together, you double the signal to noise ratio. So if you take one image, that's fine. You take four, then you can double the signal to noise ratio. You take eight, you double the signal to noise ratio again, and then you take 32, the signal to noise ratio is doubled again.
right,
And so the idea was that even in a light polluted area, if I use a digital camera to take pictures, I can stack the images together and basically blast through the light pollution. Because light pollution, I do a lot of radio stuff too, but light pollution essentially acts like noise. And so if you are able to double the signal to noise ratio, so you double the amount of signal compared to the noise, you can start getting really good images out. So
okay,
what I ended up doing, and you can see this behind me, because I have no better place to put it than the middle of my lab, is a telescope, and it's fully computer controlled, a lot of custom hardware on it. And basically, what I do is I take it out to the parking lot in the most light polluted area you've ever seen in your entire life. It is Bortle 9, what they call Bortle 9, and the computer, has a whole database of stars, and so it knows exactly what it's looking at, and it does something called plate solving. So it's like, I want you to look in this direction. It knows roughly where that direction is, but then it can view the stars and be like, oh, I'm off by 6 degrees, and or
right,
actually it'd be more like 6 arc minutes, but it gets really really precise, and then it just stares at that location all night, and it takes picture after picture after picture. And then in the morning, I come pick up the telescope and I put all those together. And essentially, what I've done at that point is take a 8-hour exposure, um,
right.
and it totally works. And I will actually share some pictures of some of the stuff that I've taken with the telescope.
Yeah.
If I can pull that up really quickly.
Oh, hold on. Let me make you a co-host here, so
Okay.
that way you can share, and then we're going where no man has gone before on this Zoom, where I'm actually going to be showing a share on the screen here. So.
All right. So let's see. Where should I put this? So files, astrophotography. We'll do a more recent one. The North American Nebula. Here we go. So I will. Let's see. Share. Here we go. Share. Oop. All right. You seeing that? I'll shrink the
Yes.
window a bit.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It works.
Yeah, it works. So this is what's called the North American Nebula for obvious reasons. And it is near Cygnus. It's in the Cygnus constellation. So Cygnus is the swan, and it's a
Right.
summertime constellation, which is how you can tell I took this recently. And the way it worked is that because this is a nebula, it has very specific wavelengths that it is emitting. So if you ever learned about spectroscopy, you'll learn that certain elements and certain ions of different elements will emit certain wavelengths of light. So in this case, I was looking at hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3, and sulfur 2.
Okay.
And I have a monochrome camera in the back of my telescope. And so I would take, like 6 images of hydrogen, and then I have an automatic filter to go to the next thing. And I'd take, 6 images of oxygen emissions, and then, 6 images of sulfur. And then it becomes absolute art. I go in,
Right.
and I'm like, how would this look best? This is not a true color image. This is spectra that I picked up off a sensor, right? Pure data.
Right.
So I was like, I wanted to look sort of like bluish and reddish, to add some contrast where you can see different types of gases. And so I believe most of the blue stuff is hydrogen. I think most of the red you see here is oxygen. Normally, if you were to look this, if you could see a nebula with your naked eye, the oxygen would actually be a bit blue, and the hydrogen is this like really deep red. But because, like I said, I get to have fun with the processing because I'm just working with raw data.
Right.
This is what I sort of came up with. So that's one example.
You can make the oxygen green, or you can make the oxygen, whatever color you'd like. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you've got all this light pollution. My time in the Navy, I learned about something called scintillation, which is when the ionosphere is more or less active because the sun shines on it, it excites it, and it causes it to vibrate, and that's why you get stars that twinkle, and those kinds of things. How do you keep that from happening in your pictures or in your data?
Oh, so that's a good question. How do you keep twinkling from messing up your data? So for things like nebulas, they're actually very large. Angular size in the night sky. So that image was not taken with this specific telescope. It was taken with a smaller one that could get to larger image. You can think of that entire image being roughly the same amount of area as like the moon.
Okay.
So it's pretty large. So in that case, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're dealing with something like a planet is when you look at a planet and a very high focal length telescope, so it has a lot of zoom. You look at it up in the sky, it's going to look like it's underwater because all the atmospheric scintillation, as you said, and all the atmospheric turbulence will just make the planet looks like you're viewing it from underwater. So you got to use a different technique. So for planets, what you would do is you would use a video camera, essentially, just a regular color video camera, and you start shooting as fast as you can. So, 200 frames per second, 300 frames per second, and just record these videos. And then when you're done, you record for maybe, 3 minutes, 6 minutes. When you're done, you have a computer go through the output and you do something called lucky imaging. So that is where you try to just pick out the exact frames that did not look like they were distorted underwater. and if you're taking like a 3-minute video, you can take like the top 20% of those, and then once again you can stack them together to increase the signal to noise ratio, and you get a nice clear image of a planet. So that is the easiest, stupidest way to deal with that. If you have a lot of money and I'm talking millions of dollars, and you're setting up your own telescope for a university, you can shoot lasers up in the sky. And this is the only other way I've seen them do this. You shoot lasers up in the sky, and you have another camera view how that laser is being distorted, because that tells you what's going on in the atmosphere.
Okay.
And then you can have a computer then adjust the mirrors just as quickly to compensate for that. So that's And of course, the other way is to just throw your telescope in space, which is where Hubble and James Webb and everything comes from.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
yep.
I put up a picture of some space porn from JWST. Yeah, yeah, I almost have like a daily photo of something that they've taken that they put up. But so you mentioned software on this. I mean, obviously, is this trial or error? I mean, do you ever put something out and you're like, oh, I didn't catch anything, or oh, there's bird landed on my telescope, or wind caused issues, or I mean, what kind of is it trial and error? I mean, do you ever get some really good stuff, or is it like just hit or miss?
So when I was setting everything up, it was total trial and error. Because
Okay.
you can't go to the store and buy something like this yet.
Right.
So I would, get a basic setup. I would take it out for the night, see how it works, see if there was any issues, go back to the drawing board, figure out what I can improve, take it out the next night, do it again and again and again. Just like any engineering project, it was iterative. So I would, take the telescope out. I would realize there's something called a meridian flip, which is where if you have an equatorial mount, once again, we can talk about this later, but there is a point where the telescope has to sort of switch around the meridian line to keep tracking an object. And I've noticed that sometimes the system will basically bugger out when it's time to do that. So I specifically designed my software now to reset every time there's a meridian flip. So instead of trying just to continue from the meridian flip, it will completely go back to home, and then go back and then reset itself up to continue tracking. There's other things too, like sometimes it can be hard to get a good autofocus, if you're tracking something that's kind of low in the horizon. So one of the other things that I do is I have the telescope essentially point straight up where there's the least amount of atmosphere, above, and then start autofocusing on those stars every, like 45 minutes, just to make sure everything is good.
Right.
So you do those kind of iterative things. One time I had the power cord unplug in the middle of the night, so now I have like Velcros. It's complete trial and error. And then eventually it's like, okay, no more issues. I can just take it out, leave it out. I get pictures. It's good.
So I don't. You can tell me to get stuffed or whatever, but that back there looks like you're either trying to create a time machine, or you're trying to create nuclear fusion at home. That doesn't look cheap. Obviously this is you're not. How much would something like that go for? And would you do it again the same way if you had the chance to build version 2?
So the telescope, would I build it the exact same, and how expensive is it? Okay, so answer is yes, I would totally do it the same.
Okay.
And it's expensive, but not as expensive as you're thinking. So
good.
When you are building a telescope, you have to spend money wisely. And of course, the most important thing that you can buy for your telescope is
a lens.
No.
Good camera.
No, it's the mount.
The mount.
The mount is the most.
That was my next one.
Yes.
Yes.
So yes, that is the most important thing, because it has to have a motor that tracks to within an arc minute, or within an arc minute. It's so it can easily track and have all your equipment on it and be computer controlled. That is very expensive, but it's the most important thing, and you can use it across different telescopes really easily.
Okay.
So the mount that I got is a very popular one called the ZWO AM5, which goes for about $2,000. Plus the peer extension and a few other things, but it's definitely not cheap. But that is the most expensive part of that telescope. And then the telescope itself, like the mirror and the lens and everything, That was about 1,400 for the big one, and a little under 1,000 for the small one I have.
Okay.
And then the rest of the equipment is not that expensive at all. So I'm using something called it's like a x86 like Raspberry Pi device called like a Melee PC to do most of the server type stuff on
Okay.
the thing. And I'm using like a USB GPS receiver for the GPS and a GL Link like mini portable travel router for the network connections. I mean,
Right.
like
That's
it's
cool.
a lot of this stuff isn't super expensive, but I mean, there's a lot of little things though, like
Right.
the
Right.
battery was expensive. So there's heaters on the telescope because you get dew. And so the heating elements just take so much power. So I have one of those giant like battery banks that was like $600. It's ridiculous, but
I was about to say, why didn't you use solar panels? I'm like, duh, it's at night. I'm an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. We can talk about reflex solar later if you want. But the camera itself, cameras, I go for about $700 to $1,000 for the specialty cameras I use.
Okay.
So like I said, the most expensive thing is the mount, and then the telescope and camera are like 1,000, 1,500, and then the rest are just little things you can buy off Amazon. So
and then you need a big old chain to chain it to your car or something so people won't walk off with it, right?
I don't think there's a huge market for selling telescopes on the street.
It's a huge black market in San Francisco. You just go down to the local satellite market, and yeah. That's huge.
Yeah. So my solution was you can get bike alarms that if you try to move the bike, it'll start beeping. So I just put on a bike alarm, and it's fine.
Nice.
I don't think people are going to be drawn to the telescope when I'm on the roof. Okay, like
there you go.
Who's going to come up there? But even if they do, on the ground floor, there's a cage full of bikes that need to be stolen first before people start getting desperate enough to take my telescope. So
yeah.
Okay, so question: have you thought about traveling to a location like in Idaho or Nevada, Eastern Oregon, where there is no or very little light pollution?
Great question. So have I ever thought about traveling to a low light polluted area place?
Yeah. And how would that affect your image? Even, how would that improve it, even given that you're taking thousands of images and putting them together?
Right. So the answer is it would be really cool. The problem is the logistics of getting that kind of equipment to another state is not simple, especially for me. I don't currently have a car, but there's a lot of logistics. And if you could bring it to a dark skies site, you would just get better images in shorter amounts of times. It's that simple. Like the images that I get look nice, but I'm spending 8 hours. If I spend 8 hours in a dark sky site, I probably could get something that I could throw up on Astronomy Picture of the Day over at NASA.
Nice.
But because I do have to work with all this light pollution, I'm just happy that I can get what I get, which is pretty amazing.
That is pretty awesome.
Do you have an image of a planet?
I do. I do. So my system is set up specifically for nebulas and galaxies, but I should somewhere around here have a here we go. Let me share my screen again.
Yeah. Because somebody in our chat, Bronx Dad, thanks Bronx Dad for following, by the way. I know that one.
Yeah,
that's
Jupiter.
Nice. That's nice. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, definitely not the best picture of Jupiter, but I was just doing a test, and I snapped a picture of Jupiter just to make sure it was working.
That's fantastic.
This is not the video compilation, but just an image.
I believe. Let's see. No, it was a video. I took that
Video?
was the video. Yeah. I
Oh,
took it
nice.
with actually I think a small telescope. So ideally you'd want like a telescope with a very large, very long focal length. This one, I actually reduced the focal length. I have a focal length reducer at the end to make it zoom out a bit more. So the difference is if you have a focal ratio on cameras and on telescopes, the focal ratio is your aperture to your focal length, or I should say your focal length divided by your aperture. Wait, yeah, sorry. Your focal length divided by your aperture. So if you, and that describes how bright your images are coming in. And so if I'm doing a faint object like a galaxy or a nebula, I want my images to be brighter. So I specifically reduce the focal length on these telescopes. But if you're doing something that's already bright, like a planet, you want as much zoom as possible. So
Nice.
like I said, this is not set up for planetary stuff.
Yeah. So Bronx Dad asked the question, says, do you have details on the software that analyzes the sky to control the telescope? Sounds like low-level programming. Is this specifically in-house made by yourself? Because I know you're a very talented programmer. It's off-the-shelf stuff.
It is off the shelf. I will share my browser if I can.
Yes.
Still Firefox. You can see all my tabs, including my email. That's nice.
That's okay. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I just got into vertical tabs recently, so.
Yeah. So the main plate solving software I use is called ASTAP. And basically what you do is you come here, you can download the program, and then you download a database. And you can figure out what sort of database you need based on the focal length of your telescope. So it looks like I downloaded D80 and D50, as well as the program. And then I can send snapshots to the ASTAP program, which will do the plate solving for me. You can also do plate solving online. So if we go to online plate solving, there we go. Astronomy.net plate solving. So I will upload one of my files. And let's see, we'll do the Horsehead Nebula. All right. And we want, file. Okay, upload. So I uploaded this file of an image that I took of the Horsehead Nebula.
Okay.
And within about 10 minutes, it will tell me where in the sky the image was taken. Oh, go to the results page. There we go. Oops, not ready yet. Still processing. And yeah, this is the Horsehead Nebula. And this, I believe, is in true color. So this is a regular color camera. And this is what nebulas normally look like. It's mostly hydrogen. So you get that deep red. That's the Flame Nebula at the bottom left. And we just wait for it to solve. Come on. There we go. And there we go. It tells us where it was taken, what the... So when you look at the sky, if you're looking at the celestial sphere, instead of longitude and latitude, they have right ascension and declination. And there we go.
Okay.
It's that simple.
Right on. So what software are you using to control the telescope itself? Is that just comes with the mount, or is there some kind of specific low-level kind of stuff? Like you said, it's all COTS, but I mean, do you have to make any tweaks?
I do have to make a lot of tweaks. So the main program that I use for controlling the camera or controlling the telescope and giving it scripts, because you essentially script the camera and the telescope. You know, basically, like, you do this all night and you write the scripts, and the scripting engine and everything is basically wrapped around this program right here, which is called NINA, or Nighttime Imaging and Astronomy. And you can see a few screenshots here on their webpage. But you can connect all your astronomy equipment, the camera, the mount, the heaters, the temperature sensors, you know, everything can get integrated into NINA. which can then go and tie everything together, run your scripts, take images all night. Fantastic piece of software. The other piece of software that I use for controlling the
And
mount
it looks
and
like
everything.
it's open source too.
It is open source, absolutely. There's also PhD guiding. So like I said, I'm taking 3-minute exposures on a portion of the night sky, which is maybe a few arc minutes in size. So in order to make sure that, and we need to share cats.
Yes.
There we go. Dual cat sharing. So this is called PhD guiding.
You're headless.
The idea is that I actually have 2 cameras on my telescope. One is either on like a guide scope or picked off using a prism through the main scope. And it just makes sure that it's always pointing at the same location. So if it sees the stars move a little bit, it'll automatically correct the mount to make sure that it keeps pointing in the right direction. So those are the two main softwares for controlling the mount.
Oh, well, there you go, Bronx Dad. Off-the-shelf stuff. I put links in the chat, and will be in our show notes as well for anybody who wants to go check those various sites out. Oh, let me go back to there we go. Very cool. Wow. So I had invited you on before I found out about the mini moon. So I was kind of geeking out over this, and I didn't realize that this kind of happens a lot. It's just it wasn't mentioned it wasn't mentioned a lot in the news in the past. I think the last time they had one was in 2020, but we're going to get a moon, another one, for about 57 days, starting in September, the end of September here. So in about a week or so.
You're not gonna see anything, by the way.
I know, it's fine.
Yeah.
I was getting all excited about another lunar eclipse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't get enough of those. Not enough full moons or whatever. I thought it might be lunitary or nunitary. For you Dragonlance fans, you understand that. But it's called the Arjuna asteroid. It's from the Arjuna asteroid belt, and it's apparently one just it's the survivor loser who just got kicked out of the asteroid belt, and it's just coming around to say hi, and then it's going to head right back into the sun, and then it will be back in 2055. I don't know if that's the makings of a comet, but it's going to make its regular approach back in it said we've had previous mini moon events in 1981. Oh, in 2022, that's what it is. But yeah, this one's going to be 10 times the distance from Earth to the moon. So you got the moon, and then this one is like 10 times further out. And so, yeah.
So you have to remember scale here. This thing we were talking about, we don't know like how big it's going to be, but we know might be 11 meters. It might be 100 meters.
Yeah.
It still does not matter. It's still roughly at that scale, basically invisible. So the moon is about 350,000 kilometers away.
Right.
And if it's 10 times further than the moon, that's, you can do a little bit of math. That's 3 million,
Yeah.
That's over 3 million kilometers away. Yeah.
Yeah. According to USA Today, they said it will be 2.8 million miles or 4.5 million kilometers. And it is heading at a steady pace of about 2,200 miles an hour or 3,500, give or take, kilometers per hour. So yeah, we're not going to be able to see it. It's going to be the size of a Volkswagen, but it's a moon. Maybe we could name it something like Moony McMoonface or something like that, as it flies by, or whatever.
Yeah, so it's actually just a temporary moon. So this happens. So basically, what happens is that you have an asteroid that is roughly on Earth's orbit, kind of goes near Earth, and then sort of orbits us for a little bit, and then kind of goes on its merry way. But the thing is, no one will know on the ground, other than the astronomers and stuff, because, like I said, it's not very big. You could take out a telescope, a big telescope, like professional telescope, train it on it. You would see like a small dot There's a Rayleigh limit to,
Right. Right.
yeah, you can't zoom in forever.
Yep.
But it's so far away, even if it were a kilometer in size, it still would just not be visible with
Yeah.
telescopes. So
Yeah. Yeah, they say too small for amateur telescopes and binoculars. It is well within the range, brightness range of typical telescopes used by professional astronomers. Are you a professional astronomer?
I am not a professional astronomer in the
Oh.
slightest.
You
Like I said, I could see a dot on the screen.
Right,
I could take a
right.
dot with my camera. That's about it.
And it, you could just say, here's the dot, and you'd be like, is that the real thing? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. See, there it is right there. You can see it. See that dot right there? That's it. That's it. Right
Actually,
there. Oh, no, wait.
actually,
that one.
it's very easy to actually figure out what is the thing in Earth's orbit versus what's not in Earth's orbit. And I'll give you an example.
Is it the plate comparison thing? That's how they found Pluto,
Nope.
right? Where they're oh, okay.
Well, yes, I mean but we're talking about within like Earth's orbit. That is how they found Pluto. And I have imaged Pluto before with my telescopes, which is amazing. But
very cool.
If you want to, let's see if I can find it. Let's see, Iridium M61, Meteor M23. Nope. Starlink. Nope. Where's the one I'm looking for?
Seriously, I looked up mini moon, and one of the links on the front of Google is popular destinations for the mini moon, and I'm like, what? And so I don't know if they're trying to get people to come and like go to Miami Beach to see the mini moon. I don't know, but anyway, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So this is oops, trying to.
Oh yeah.
So this is. I was looking at satellite hacking with the telescope,
right?
And I picked a random geostationary satellite, which should be GOES 18. Right. That's why I pointed it at. And so you can see here, basically what I did is I took like a 2-minute exposure, and I trained it at the exact same point in the sky. Now, of course, the Earth is rotating, 15 degrees per hour. But geostationary satellites look like they're always in the same spot in the sky.
Right.
So if you just train your telescope where the satellite's supposed to be, or a mini moon, you will see this dot where everything else will be trails.
Right.
And that's how you can spot like, oh yes, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Mr. Betcher, you had a question before we got started. You were supposed to write it down, but I didn't see it on the doc. Did you want to talk about that one at all?
Yeah. Okay. Since they don't know the size or the mass of this object, this mini moon, how do they know that it's going to just orbit the Earth for 57 days and then go out toward the sun? I mean, wouldn't they have to know, and also the distance, but perhaps?
Absolutely. So they would need to know the distance for sure. But the question was, do they need to know the mass of the object? And the answer is no, they do not need to know the mass of the object to figure out where it's going to orbit the Earth, and if it's going to be stable or not. And there's a very good reason for this. So if you look at, and I'm going to share my screen again because I knew you were going to ask this question. So I was able to pull up a good resource before.
Multitasking. Huh?
Multitasking, yes. See, it's great if I'm prepared to know what questions are going to be asked. So here we have orbits and orbital velocity from some random web page. We're looking at the kinematics of Newton's gravitational equations, which is F equals G big M little m over r squared, right? It's just the standard gravity equation. But when you do the kinematics, so you're just looking instead of the forces, which is the dynamics, you're looking at just the kinematics, which is how it moves. You'll see here that first you get the acceleration, and then if you remember your calculus, you can integrate the acceleration to get the velocity. And you'll see that the like terms going from the dynamics to the kinematics means that the mass of the smaller object is irrelevant. It cancels out, essentially. So when you're looking at an orbit of, let's say, 100 kilometers above, or not 100 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers above Earth. Let's just say random orbit, 1,000 kilometers above Earth. If you have an object that's like the weight of a beach ball or a weight of a astrocat, that you send that at the same velocity as something as large as this International Space Station. It doesn't matter the mass of what you're putting in orbit. All that matters is Earth's mass, and so you just that's basically the answer to that's the complicated answer to your question, is that the mass of the smaller object just cancels out when you're talking about the kinematics of the orbit.
See, I was
The
told
mass
math
of the
was not
smaller object cancels out.
Yep.
right.
So even if it were as big as the moon,
right. So if
cancel?
Yeah, so even if it was as big as the moon, in fact, if I were to send AstroCat into the same orbital distance as the moon and put her in the same orbit, she would be orbiting at the same speed as the moon orbits around Earth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. So yeah, I'm glad that I'm glad that it's small and it's not like, we're going to have to find, Bruce Willis and everybody to go up there and drill a hole and, blow that thing up. But
how do you measure the distance? Do you shine a laser at it and then measure how long it takes to see that dot?
Yes, good question. How do you measure the distance? Answer is, as always, radio. You bounce radio waves off of the object and you see how long it takes to return. And sometimes you can bounce light. I know that the Apollo astronauts, for example, left retroreflectors on the moon. And so you can shine a laser on the moon and wait to see how long that takes back. But because the speed of light is constant, bounce a signal off your object, you know how far away it is. You can also use parallax. So if you have two telescopes opposite side of the planet looking at the same object, you can figure out through parallax how far away something is. So
nice.
those are the two ways to do it usually.
That's awesome. Man, I'm glad that all of our streamers were able to indulge me here with my science kick. I was really just kind of geeking out over the satellite hacking and the mini moon, but Mr. Betcher, I don't have anything else. I'm just.
Was it an accident, a complete accident? This thing was found.
I wouldn't say an accident. So the question is, did people just accidentally stumble upon it? If you look at where there are telescopes, like for rent, you'll often find there are companies in Chile, for example, that will say, you can put your telescope here for rent. We'll keep it here. And you can go in and they have tours of everyone's telescopes, and you'll see like surveying telescopes there as well. So there's people actively surveying the night sky, looking for new objects, stuff like that. So it's not like someone just randomly is just like, oh my gosh, look what I discovered. Although that does happen. That does happen. So one time recently, there was a supernova in the Pinwheel Galaxy, and some amateur astronomers, because it's a common target for, amateurs like me. Some amateurs saw it just go supernova.
Wow. Yeah, here's an article on space.com talking about it, along with some pictures there. So very nice. Anybody have any other questions in our chat or chats? Just to make sure that we get those. Thanks again, Bronx Dad, for your question. It's very, very appreciative of you. All right. Well, Kaitlyn, I think we're good. I think we're gonna call it good. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your hobby. I mean, that's great. It's awesome to see InfoSec people with cool hobbies.
Audio went down.
I can hear you. I can't hear Brian though.
Yeah.
I think he needs to switch batteries. Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, and this one's low too. So we'll see how long we go. Yeah, I'm just glad to see people in InfoSec having such healthy hobbies. Oh, is it me again?
You cut
you
out for a quick second.
okay.
Yeah.
You were jittery.
Okay. So yeah, maybe you could tell people a little bit about how to get a hold of you if they wanted to contact you more about photography.
Yeah, so you can contact me on Mastodon or X. So basically, when all that stuff happened with X, Twitter, whatever, I basically dropped off social media. Like I was like, I'm just gonna wait for this to blow over.
Right.
So I am Kaitlyn Guru on those. I just started a YouTube channel called Astro Kate Sat Hacks. And I have a website called Kaitlyn.guru, which I don't think I've touched in like 2 years. But it's, come and find me if you can. It's an invitation for hackers to do a little OSINT to try to find me and contact me. So
that's awesome. Okay. Mr. Betcher, tell people where you are real quick before I go.
I am at home. I'm just kidding. Yeah, you can find me at Twitter or LinkedIn. I don't do much social media though. I was asked recently though if I'm on Facebook, and no, I've never been on Facebook.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I haven't. I've curtailed mine for the last couple months. So, but you can find me on Twitter at Brian Break. I'm also on Reddit at BreakB. I frequent a lot of Reddits there. And you can hit up our twitch.tv/Breaksec, BRAKESEC. And we're on YouTube at youtube.com/BreakSecEd, ED. So BreakSec Education. So I'm going to go. Thanks to everyone who came in. Thank you, Kaitlyn, so much for your time and effort, and appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Betcher, for joining me. And I'll be back on Tuesday with our normal stream. So hope everyone has a great rest of your week, or a great week. Be kind to one another and take care of yourselves, okay? Because as we're fond of saying here, you're the only you've got. So we'll talk to you again soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.